Atheist Alliance International Podcast.
I don't make this stuff up.
You know, if you put Jesus Christ first, that he'll look after all your bills.
It's not fake, it's faith.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Atheist Alliance International Podcast. I'm your host, Jason, aka Diogenes of Mayberry. Just before we get started, I'd like to remind everyone to please like and subscribe. Today we're joined once again, we've had him on before, Amir Schnabel, who is president of the Israeli Atheist organization. He's here to tell us all about what's going on in Israel with the latest Netanyahu government and some of the large protests that have been happening. So welcome, Amir. It's good to have you back on again.
I'm happy to be here again.
Yeah. So tell us what's going on over there. I know you yourself have been in some of these protests. So maybe for the people who aren't familiar, maybe give us a quick intro into what's happened with the recent election.
Okay, I'll try to give you a brief history of what's going on. And just in a few minutes, I'll give you a short overview of what is my position at the moment. So, as you know, that's why I'm here. I'm heading the Atheist organization in Israel. So we're very close and worries about stuff where religion is interfering in our daily life. But now we took a different direction. For some reason, our country was hijacked. I don't have another word to tell it, but it was actually hijacked. And I will go into details of this later on. But before I go about this hijacking theory, actually it's more than a theory, I think it's a fact. I'll start talking about the history and what led us to the position where we are standing right now. So if you follow the news in the past 8 weeks, we have large demonstrations in Israel. We're talking about demonstrations and protests that having about 300,000 people going out of the home. We're seeing many organizations that never were involved in protest, such as the high-tech protest movement. That's people that are part of the high-tech industry, which is very important in Israel. It's probably the highest tax-paying industry in Israel, so it's very important. And it usually was characterized by people that take their money and enjoy their life and having a good social background, like an economy background, and are not involved in politics. But something happened. And we see a real danger to liberal Israel, a danger that consists of laws that will enable the government complete control on the judicial process and Supreme Court. We are seeing laws that are waiting to be passed that belong to, for example, to allow a service to be rejected upon a religion belief. That's why if this law will pass, and it is written in the coalition agreement that was signed a few weeks in the beginning, in the forming of the government. And those laws, one of them says that services can be refused upon religion causes. So people might refuse to give LGBT services. That's something that is absolutely unacceptable. We are afraid of laws that will allow people to refuse service for Arabs or for women in some respects. And all those laws started to be passed in the last 2 weeks. And liberal Israel, most of Israelis decided to fight it. We'll do whatever we can to fight it. And it doesn't seem very optimistic at the moment, but when you see such a vast amount of people that going out of the streets 2 times a week, mostly on Saturdays, but also in the middle of the week, on the working days, people that decided that they will do whatever they can to not allow a dictatorship to be established in Israel. We are a democracy, we are a liberal democracy, and we want to stay that way. So we talked about history, what led us to that point. It's a big one because it's complicated, and it's actually made up of different parties joining together into a coalition, each party with a different agenda that all mount to the same reason, to the same thing that they want to establish, a complete control of the Supreme Court, making the Supreme Court obsolete. How you do that? They decided that the coalition will be the only responsible for appointing Supreme Court judges. They passed in a law that if the Supreme Court will decide to cancel a law that contradict human rights, for example, the government will be able to override it and to cancel the Supreme Court decision. As I said, the appointment of the judges might not even get to this point because they want to appoint all the judges according to their political stance. They decided to fire all the legal workers under the offices, the ministerial offices. That will make them also proxies of the government, of the coalition, of the force, and not someone that is protecting the laws. We're talking, simply put it, this is a dictatorship, and that's what we are heading for. 2 weeks ago, they started to pass the law. So that's what's going on. But we're talking about what led us to this point.
So who was appointing the Supreme Court justices before? I know in the U.S., like the president is the one who nominates them, and then Congress and the Senate have to vote them in. How were the justices appointed before if it wasn't by the government?
Okay, let's start with talking what is the United States and Israel. The United States are something very, very... What? Sorry,
no, because you were saying that the government is changing the laws to appoint the justices. So I'm just curious, so how were the justices appointed before?
Okay, we used to have as it's now, because the law is still in the process, there's a committee that appoint judges. The committee consists of something like 3 members of the Knesset, of the parliament, 2 of the coalition, 1 of the opposition. We have 3 judges from the Supreme Court and 2 representatives from how do you call it, the lawyers organization. There's a lawyer organization that is freely elected by lawyers. So it's something like that. Maybe I'm a bit wrong about the numbers, but basically what it happened is no one has a veto power over appointing of a judge. They need always to come up with some kind of discussion or some kind of agreement between all of them. So it's not something that the government can force an appointing of someone. It has to be an agreement between all of them. It's like, that's the way it goes. But what they're going to do now, they're going to fire the lawyers. Instead of the lawyers that I was talking about, they're going to appoint coalition members, and that way they'll have a full majority of that committee. You were talking about what...
I was going to say, it sounds like it's heading the way the U.S. does, right? Because the Trump government was accused of stacking the Supreme Court with conservatives. So it sounds like Israel's moving in the direction of how U.S. justices are appointed.
Exactly. But there's one minor difference, very minor difference. The U.S. has something that is called Constitution. The Constitution protects human rights. In Israel, we don't have a constitution. We have the Declaration of Independence that states that everyone entitled to be equal, with no matter if your nationality, your gender, there's a list of all the stuff in the Independence Declaration, but it doesn't have a legal stance in Israel. So basically, there's nothing that the judges are obliged to go after. In the US, okay, you can elect a conservative judge, but still, he has to work according to the Constitution. In Israel, you don't have such a thing. And without having a Constitution, they can do anything they want. There's nothing that will limit them. That's our problem.
Okay.
So
you mentioned that they're starting to limit, the coalition is wanting to limit rights for Arabs, for women, for LGBT. So as you said, there's nothing in the declaration that's legally binding, and they're trying to institute some of these changes and to basically say, from what I remember reading in the news, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that the government will not be bound by Supreme Court decisions, that they can, if a Supreme Court justice makes a decision that the government doesn't agree with, the government can just ignore it or overrule it. Is that correct?
Practically, yes. What they're passing is, they call it the override rule or override law, that will enable them to just to override any Supreme Court decision. The problem is that, again, it's okay, and you have such laws in many democracies. But usually, those laws can be applied only if you have a majority of supporters, like 70% or 80% majority, in order to override the Supreme Court rule. But what they're going to do in Israel, that they'll be able to override the law just by a simple majority of 51% about. It's 61 members out of 120 parliament members. So, of course, you can't have a coalition if you have less than 61. So it means it's the minimum possible for a coalition to override the justice decision. So it's really, really scary.
And this is what's bringing out all the protesters, this and other issues. So,
all this.
Okay. You said there's about 300,000 people, you said, have been protesting on the streets?
I think that last night we've been about 200,000 just in Tel Aviv, which is the largest city. And there were many demonstrations in many other cities around Israel. We think that about 100,000, maybe even more, in other cities throughout Israel.
And are these been fairly peaceful protests, or have there been some episodes of violence?
Yeah, we are liberal, we are very nice people. No, we don't like to do, I'm not joking. Most of our demonstration until today were very, very peaceful. I know in the Tel Aviv demonstrations, the police do their best not to get into conflict with the protesters. They are very nice. We as part of the high-tech protest that I'm one of their leadership. We're having demonstration also on a Tuesday noon instead of going to work. And we did block roads many times during those demonstrations, and the police decided to let us do it. They're just going around. Sometimes they shout on us, but they're not actually doing anything. So, but I think that last night, for the first time, people broke police barricades for the first time, and some fire was lit on the main highway of Tel Aviv, and there were about 21 arrests last time I heard. And most of those arrests are short-term. They're releasing them a day or 2 days later. But for the first time, there were actual arrests. I think they're calling us the leadership of the older demonstration. We have someone that is controlling everything. And they're planning on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, to just go crazy. So they want us to destroy barricades, to block roads, to interfere with traffic, to strike. I think this Wednesday is going to be a change, and instead of being those practically quiet demonstration, we're going to break everything. Hopefully that's what happen, because that's the way that maybe we'll be able to stop this craziness.
Do you think you have a hope? I mean, Netanyahu has a history of ignoring his critics, both domestic and international, and just doing whatever he wants, which is what he's doing with these new laws. So do you think he's listening to the protesters? And given the scale of how many people are turning out, do you think it's getting his attention and he's maybe going to reconsider?
I don't think he listens. He has his own agenda. We were talking about, I didn't get into it, but we'll talk soon about the history, what led us to this point. It's very connected to this. Netanyahu wants only one thing he cares about, is to get out of his trials. He's indicted for bribery right now. That's the only thing he cares about. He wants all those laws to pass. That way he'll be able to cancel all his proceedings against him. He's very weak. Because of this situation, he's very weak. The other parties inside his coalition are very extreme. As funny as it may sound, is the leftmost people in the government. I wouldn't call it left, but it's relativity. And all those other parties are actually going to force him to go ahead with all those laws. And that's what we are seeing. They're pressuring him. They don't want any compromises. They're running with those laws without even having basic public discussions, or even discussion inside parliament. There are barely discussions. They're just pushing it forward and forward. They want to finish it as soon as possible, and I mean to finish all these legal laws, to finish them by the end of March, which is really, really close. We're talking about 4 weeks to finish everything. So, but what can happen?
From what I know of Israeli politics, it's pretty contentious.
Yes. What might change the situation? Is we can recognize some weak points, some weak parliament members inside his party, not in the outside parties, in the parties that are part of Netanyahu's party. And we are trying to force them and to put pressure on them personally to object the laws or to interfere with the actions that are taken. There are people that might think about their future. Maybe they are connected to Americans' influence. We're trying to work that way. Maybe the coalition of Netanyahu has 64 members out of 120. So we actually need to convince four parliament members to switch side, or just to to oppose the laws, the legislation, and maybe we'll see a change.
So what about those people within his party? Are they willing to stand up to him?
Not at the moment. Not at the moment. We're putting pressure on them. If it's emails, phone, demonstration outside of the private residence, and we hope someone will wake up.
Yeah.
We're targeting specific people that we know that have different agenda. If it was up to
Israel's had multiple elections in the last few years, and there's never any clear majority. It's always a coalition of compromise. So, and yet you have 300,000 protesters out there. So surely these 300,000 people, there are people who are voting against Netanyahu, but still Netanyahu's getting elected. He's been elected multiple times in the past. So, like, is there any hope for the future of Israeli politics, given the fact that it seems to be kind of not only evenly divided, but just divisive in general in terms of the two sides, or the right and the left in Israel? Like, what's your feeling for the future?
It doesn't look good. I have to admit, it doesn't look good. What I do hope for, what I do see at the moment, we know that many people that voted for Netanyahu are joining our protest. Even religious people that are switching sides and that are preferring to see democratic Israel. We see there are not many people that consider them as ideological right-wings that are kind of more pure and not talking about public opinion too much. They are switching sides, and they're coming to demonstrations. They are speaking their voice. We can hear them. We can see and hear them. I think that in the latest poll taken last Friday, there's the opposition now have something predicted to have about 65 members in parliament against 56 members of the current coalition. The gap is for 120 consists of Arabs party that are not affiliated, but usually they are going with left wing. That's the number that we are seeing right now. So if we'll be able to, I think.
Yeah, you are saying that some of the people who voted for Netanyahu are now joining the protests. So did they not understand what kind of a man Netanyahu is before they voted for him?
Right.
It seems like they're a little late to the party.
No,
switching to the protest when they voted for him before, not knowing what his track record was, and like as you said, this is a man who's trying just to get out of all his legal troubles. So they supported him before, and now they're finally seeing what kind of a man he really is, and switching sides. It's a little too late.
I think they were deceived. I don't have another word for it. They were deceived during the election. The election was around the last election. Was the subject that were leading the election were the cost of living. He said that he's going to lower the cost of living. Of course, it didn't happen, especially now when, because of those judicial process, what's going on, the shekel was very weakened by about 10%. It dropped during the last month. He was saying that it's going to give us more security, because there were some Palestinian attacks. Some Israelis were killed in Tel Aviv and some other parts, and he was claiming that it's going to solve the issue. People believed it. Of course, it didn't. The situation never changed. It hadn't changed for the last 50 years. But he was trying to say that he's going to do it better. He said that the center-left government that used to be last year gave money to terrorists. It was a lie. Especially on Friday, they passed the new budget for 2024. And the budget is the exact same benefits that they gave the Arabs party in the last government. Netanyahu is going to give the same, because it's not politics, it's necessities. You don't change it. But he claimed during the election that they gave money for terrorists. And he did the same amount of money, didn't change any of the plans, everything stayed the same. So it was kind of deceived. And another thing that he did, they said that they want to fix the judicial system. I think many Israelis understand that we need to do some adjustments. But as I said, you don't do adjustment for the system, for your mouth. If your teeth has a cavity, you don't take all the teeth out for that. You just fix what you need to fix. You don't need to destroy everything. And that's what so he said that he's going to do some adjustment, and actually what he's doing is destroying everything. And about the court, there's a huge deceiving media that is working to try to convince everybody that he was unjustly charged. He's not guilty. It's just a conspiracy of the left wing, and people believe it.
So really, the only way to stop it right now, as you said, is to convince 4 or 5 of his own members of his party to change sides. He needs to lose his coalition majority. That's the only thing that'll stop him.
That's the only thing. There's another dream. I can't call it more than that. That they might get to a point where some of those parties inside this government will fight each other and decide to break the coalition, because they built a very strange coalition. We can get into that. They gave a lot of power to the extreme national right, religious right. Those groups that are very religious, they believe that we should annex all the West Bank, all the Palestinian land. We should, we might are justified to not give rights to the Palestinians and build more settlements. They are very extreme in that extent. We can see that we might get to a point where, international community will not let Netanyahu do all their dreams, and then they will decide that if he's not giving them the chance to build their, Messianic land, and I don't have another word for the religious land, maybe they decide to break the coalition, because they will think that they might get in a better position after a new election. Maybe that will solve it.
I remember reading, of this extreme right, Netanyahu appointed someone to I believe a cabinet minister position who's been convicted of terrorism. Was it not? There's something he was part of a far right religious fanatic group, and he was I believe he was convicted. And please correct me if that's wrong.
Yes, he was convicted. He was in jail. He was charged. This the most extreme right fascist. I don't have problem using this word. It was a fascist party that really believed in the expulsion of Arabs, something that they will never accept, and most of Israelis won't accept. And he gave him this position of and not even to be in charge of the security in Israel. They even passed some units that were like in other ministries. They gave him full power of them. For example, there's a unit in the Environment Office that was responsible for making sure land is not being used against, ecological stuff like, like making buildings inside of places that are supposed to be for agriculture. So they took this unit and passed it from the Environment Office to the Security Office and give this crazy man to be in charge of it. And now what he's going to do is going to use that environment. There used to be environment police to attack Palestinians and to destroy their home, just as an excuse that is being done for environment reason. That's why he wanted to be in charge of them. It's completely messed up.
Yeah, and it to me it's messed up. So when I hear you said Netanyahu says he's going to increase security. So I look at this, say, all right, you're going to increase security, but you're appointing this fascist who's going to do nothing but antagonize and harass the Palestinians. How does that help solve the security problem? That's just going to create more problems because you're going to piss off more Palestinians and there's going to be less security. So it makes absolutely no sense to me.
No sense. I have to agree with you. That's exactly the point. I think those guys are thinking about, they're not thinking like us. They're thinking in a religious point of view. We're atheists. We can talk about it. They're talking about religious point of view. They think that God gave them the land. They have to fulfill God's plan. And God tells them that it's our land and we need to control it. And who cares about whoever else? They don't even. Now they're saying that since God is going to help them, they don't care to get into a war. They don't care that people will die, because it's God's plan. Everything is for Him. Everything is religious.
That's frightening on so many levels.
So they don't look for peace. That's not their agenda.
Yeah. Ironically, so for those who are watching who might not know the history of Israel, the Zionists were actually secular Jews who worked to found the state of Israel. Because they were fed up with this messianic call, as you said, the far right religious people. They think the land is theirs by God and God is going to help them. But it was the secular Jews who went, you know what? We've been waiting for 2,000 years, and the religious Jews were actually outraged by the Zionists. Like that, how dare you interfere in God's plan by trying to do this on your own? And yet, then once Israel was formed, then all the religious Jews came in, and as you know, like a lot of the problems going on with the army and the men who do nothing but study the Torah, 24/7, and don't have to serve, don't have to do anything, and yet they were the very same people who objected to a secular Israel. So
I think they still are.
Yeah.
They still are rejecting. Don't you think the extreme religious? As I always point out, I'm talking about the one that wear black. Those guys don't care much about the existence of Israel, because Israel is against God's plan, like you said.
And yet they live in Israel.
Care about the money.
They
want the money. They want to be secluded in their own communities with no interference.
Yeah, sounds a bit hypocritical.
It is. Absolutely. Yeah, and this is the story, and you've got those.
Do you have any hope for the future of Israel with all of this?
I do. I don't know why, but for some reason, myself and many others last night came out with the notion that the wheel is turning our way. Something is going to the better side. I can't pinpoint exactly why we had this feeling yesterday, but we kind of feel it. So I can't say about something concrete that happened because nothing changed. But I do think that there is some hope, or the light in the end of the tunnel. There is something happening. I want to tell you about the protests. The protests are doing something great in Israel. You see all those tens of groups in Israel, many are joining together to the same reason, and it gives you a notion that we are back together, all of us. Well, you see, we are going as the high-tech protests. Yesterday we were walking with the LGBT drug section. It was really funny, and you can see a picture of it in my feed. There are women's movement, there are movements that communists, socialists, you name it, many women's rights, not one organization, but some organizations of human rights, women's rights, and you see all those working together and having the same thing to fight for. It gives you a feeling of togetherness that we are, and this gives you hope. It gives you strength. So maybe this is the light that we are looking for, being together.
That people are finally fed up with the lies and the corruption and the encroachingness on the secular values of the country. That they're fed up with that.
I'm fed up, exactly. There's something I want to talk about. We didn't enter into it. And for me, it's important to understand. I think I was talking in the beginning about the sentence that Israel was hijacked. What we found out in the last year, and specifically after the election, that there is an organization that called the Kohelet Forum. And this is an organization that is being funded by American billionaires that are aligned to the conservative, the ultra-conservative people in the United States. I mean, Trump supporters, and even more extreme than Trump, if you can imagine. And they are funding this forum. This forum has many sub-organizations in Israel. And we know now for sure that they were actually the one that wrote all those laws that are being passed now. We know it for sure that they gave it to the parliaments that are passing the laws that are responsible for what's going on. And we have those billionaires are also aligned for the January 6th story from the United States. And we really feel that we are being controlled by large forces that we don't have ability to understand them and to understand how strong they are. That's something very interesting to comprehend. So it's something, and I can give you in the chat or whatever links to this group, but this group is scary. Very conservative, very religious. You can see anti-LGBT agendas, libertarian agendas of canceling all laws that are limiting industries and especially millionaires and stuff like that, to cancel all limitation, to give a free market, to cancel all socialist values of supporting underprivileged societies and communities. And that's something that are pushing it all the time. We know they're in control. Everything comes from there.
And people are finally starting to wake up to this? Like they didn't know this was happening before?
We knew that it existed, but we didn't understand how strong they are. We didn't understand how they are using those specific parliament members to work for them. Now they're not parliament members, they're ministers. We know that they're controlling. We know that the finance minister is strongly aligned with them. We know the justice minister is strongly aligned with them. We know for sure that they wrote all those laws. Everything is known. Everything is publicized. I heard an interview last Friday in the Israeli news. They said that Israel doesn't need a constitution because we already have a constitution. They call it the Bible. It's something that I won't accept as a constitution, sorry.
Yeah.
Too outdated.
A little bit.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah.
So this is... I know.
Well, I hope you're successful in convincing those 4 or 5 members to change sides or to at least wake up to what's happening and can maybe call a vote of non-confidence. And I know Israel doesn't necessarily need another election right now, but as you said, if the other parties are now showing, the polls are showing that they've got about 65 majority, maybe a vote of non-confidence and another election is exactly what needs to happen.
Yeah. The head of the opposition party said that he's sure that we're going to have an election this year. I'm not that sure, but maybe he knows something I don't.
Yeah. Well, if you can get another few 100,000 people out to protest and change the minds of those 4 or 5 party members of Netanyahu, who knows? So
Yeah, maybe we'll do it. There is a very interesting research paper that has been quoted many times here in the protest, that a professor from Canada wrote it, and he said that if you've got an amount of 300,000 people that are protesting the government will fall, no matter what.
yeah.
We'll see. We've got those 300,000, maybe we'll be able to do it.
Yeah. No, that's a lot of people. It's still just a fraction of the population, but it's still a lot of people to be out showing their discontent, especially if you can rally that number of people. That there's obviously something fundamentally wrong to pull that many people out if they're willing to march on the streets and say, hey, we disagree with this. So.
No, we'll see. On Wednesdays, we'll have a big demonstration outside of the parliament. Now, if you know Jerusalem is maybe the worst city when you talk about the traffic. It's really a mess. And I think 300,000 people coming over to Jerusalem will just close up the city.
Yeah.
So maybe it will, just by itself, that the traffic will be stopped. It will put a lot of pressure on the city, the economy, the parliament.
Yeah. I don't think, as you said, like Netanyahu doesn't care, and the far right only cares about the Bible and God, so they don't care. So the only, as I said, I think your only option is you've got to convince 4 or 5 to defect and change sides, or at least to vote against if they won't leave the party.
There's another scenario that is being talked about in the last week. Is that the current Supreme Court will decide that the laws are illegal. All those laws that undermine democracy are illegal.
Yeah.
If they'll do that, it means we're going to a clash of the judicial system against the government. And now the question will be asked where the police forces and army will have to choose sides. But this scenario actually talks about a civil war. I really hope we won't get there.
Yeah. Well, hopefully people will choose the side of reason and rationality, at least those not on the far right, because they're clearly not able to think reasonably and rationally if they're believing so devoutly in ancient goat herder texts and believing that God is going to intervene.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay.
Well, maybe we should separate into two countries. Like in the Bible, there was Israel and Judea. Maybe we should go back there.
Yeah.
We'll have secular Israel and religious secular, and I think the religious people can handle everything. Let them enjoy life without us. No economy, nobody's working. If they can survive without us seculars.
Yeah,
maybe
I
we
don't think that. I think that's the main point. They wouldn't survive. So,
They wouldn't.
especially if all they want to do is study the Torah all day.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other points you want to make before we wrap up?
I think we passed those are the major topics. I think we covered everything.
Okay.
I hope whoever listen to our cast will be able to understand or dismiss.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping people are starting to wake up. I mean, we know there's the protest, the international protest against Israel about divesting, and then people say the Israeli government uses the anti-Semitism rhetoric, and that if they're trying to say this, there must be anti-Semitic. I'm like, no, they're just standing up to your human rights abuses. You can't hide behind the Holocaust as an excuse to deny the Palestinians their human rights and act in any way you see fit. And numerous Israeli politicians, journalists, and public figures have spoken out about this. So it's I don't know, it's very frustrating to watch, especially for the secular humanists around the world, to see this kind of blatant disregard for human rights in the name of religious privilege. So.
And that usually I used to argue about that, and now I don't feel like I'm in a position to argue with you. I think that's what we're heading there. If we're not there yet, as you said, we are heading to this position of being not democratic. As I say, whatever they're saying about Israel, if it wasn't right, it's going to be right.
Yeah.
It's really sad for me to say that.
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable, but that's reality.
Okay. Well, I wish you and your fellow protesters luck, and
thank you very much.
To be safe, and hopefully things aren't going to get too out of hand and not too violent, and not violent at all. But I hope you yourself and your friends and colleagues are safe, and can fight for secular values and a democratic country.
Thank you very much for having me and for letting me talk about our happenings and concerns. Hopefully, people will watch it. We need international awareness. We need international support wherever they can find a way to do that. Even financial support, if you can. We have donations sites to support our causes.
Okay, send me those links, and people, you can find them. You'll be able to find them in the description when this airs, so you can find the links if you want to donate to help the protesters fight for democracy and human rights. So,
thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Amir, for coming on and sharing what's going on there. I appreciate your time. So, as always, you can please like and subscribe and follow us for future episodes. We do have our affiliates on regularly. We had Amir on about a year or two ago, so I'm sure if there's another election called this year and Netanyahu gets turfed out, we'll have Amir come back and talk to us. So thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Amir. Thank you for your fights for secular values, and we'll see everybody on the next episode. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks for listening, and don't forget we're on YouTube, so follow us on YouTube. Just search for Atheist Alliance International and please subscribe and hit that notification bell. We're also on all of your favourite podcast platforms, so make sure that you follow us on there as well. See you next time.